Markets will continue to skyrocket year after year after year as long as we continue to increase the national debt year after year after year, tripling it every 10 years. What could go wrong? Hyperinflation. We can't have everything at the same time: stimulus, no inflation, and the stock market going up all the time. Oil is up almost 20%. Bankrupt airline stocks are in the mega bubble. 40% of air travel business has been lost forever. Airlines are trading at record high absurd valuations, despite record corporate loss, record stock dilutions, record high debt levels. These stocks will collapse by 85 to 90% soon. Market manipulation. What goes up fast will dive like a stone. I don't think anyone has a grasp on what will happen when the cost of servicing the national debt increases 10 to 20-fold. Apocalypse will be in full bloom by 3% alone. America is already bankrupt. The lie of solvency will continue as long as the public believes it. Then there will be panic and a run on the banks. In the meantime, stocks keep going up, until they don't. Since Joe was sworn in, gas prices are up almost 30% on average, and Joe's transportation guy Buttigieg wants to double the federal gas tax. Oil stocks up as much as 6% today, with 2 announcements of dividend increases. Perhaps we're not quite ready for unreliable, non-practical, technologically unsatisfactory, and triple the cost of green energy quite yet after all. The stimulus package is about to pass. Things about to fall right apart. Today the American empire is crumbling under the weight of military overreach, the totalitarian synergy between big tech and big government, destruction of the Constitution by traitorous surveillance state apparatchiks, the burden of unpayable debts, currency debasement, cultural decay, civic degeneration, diversity and deviancy trumping common culture and normality, pervasive corruption at every level of government, globalist agendas, and the failure of myopic leaders to deal with the real problems. The media is simply the mouthpiece of the corrupt, failed globalist debt slave machine. It is nothing but a tool. Just like social media, Disney, and Hollywood. To hold any animosity towards them is as silly as blaming mass shootings on guns. These are all tools. Cogs in the broken machine that is collapsing before our very eyes. Nearly everything in America is now a joke. The genocide by financial ruin, suicide, and opioid addiction doesn't exactly tickle my funny bone. Fascism, especially in the media, is on full display and the supreme joke. Not only is the Great Reset, Green New Deal, communist doctrine implementation not going to reverse the downward spiral of the American empire, but the last year of horrific political and financial decisions and imminent execution of the left-wing agenda through their empty senile vessel will accelerate the unavoidable collapse. There was this thing called the Great Recession. Lots of people lost their homes, banks nearly collapsed, unemployment skyrocketed. You may have heard something about that. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please take a second to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to also hit the notification bell. MMT plus QE to infinity cannot solve all our problems. The national debt went from $20 trillion when Trump was elected to $28 trillion today and $30 trillion within the next year. It took 219 years to accumulate the first $10 trillion of debt, 9 years to accumulate the next $10 trillion of debt, and now less than 5 years to accumulate the next $10 trillion. $1 trillion is $1 million every single day for 3,000 years. Meanwhile, GDP has barely grown by 2% per year, and household income has been stagnant for decades. Anyone who thinks this is sustainable, economically healthy, or representative of free market capitalism is either delusional or lying to promote their agenda of you owning nothing and being happy about it while eating bugs. Fiat only lasts 100 years, and we are at that mark now. Once a new stimulus package is approved and another $2 trillion are printed, the dollar will be deprecated more and more like it already has. The future by looking at the past. The world's reserve currency, the US dollar, in the last 80 years, the lifespan of an average person, has deflated away to have the equivalent purchasing power of less than 7 cents. That is money printing at work. It is guaranteed this will continue to happen. The Federal Reserve expanded its record holdings of U.S. Treasuries in the fourth quarter of 2020 as it continued monetizing the massive federal debt. The Fed bidding at Treasury auctions is comparable to an eBay seller bidding on his own auctions. Except the eBay seller would be charged with fraud, and Congress looks at the Fed as their hero and enabler. The Federal Reserve added another $253 billion to its Treasury holdings in Q4, according to the Fed's Treasury International Capital data released on February 16. That brought the central bank's U.S. bond holdings to $4.7 trillion. The Federal Reserve now holds a record 17.5% of all U.S. debt. They are artificially holding down bond yields. Imagine what happens if they stop buying, rates will pop. No one in their right mind would want to hold U.S. debt at these low levels. The Fed is really trapped now. Just keep on printing, though. The Fed's share of U.S. debt load exploded from 9.3% in Q1 2020 to its current level. Fed bond buying was up 5.4% in Q4 compared to Q3. As of February 22, the U.S. national debt had surged to $27.93 trillion, and there is no end in sight to government spending. Uncle Sam ran a $162.83 billion budget deficit in January alone. Total spending through the first 4 months of fiscal 2021 stood at $1.92 trillion. Over the last 12 months, the U.S. government has borrowed $4.55 trillion. In order for Uncle Sam to borrow, somebody has to lend. Foreign and domestic investors, commercial banks, and U.S. government entities all buy U.S. debt, but increasingly, the Federal Reserve is backstopping the market and making this borrowing binge possible. The problem is once Jerome commits to yield curve control, there is no longer any debate over inflation versus deflation. The Fed is trapped. We are going full Weimar Germany. They have to kill the dollar to keep this Ponzi afloat now. The dollar crisis is on the horizon. It is true that Fed Chairman Powell wants inflation. He says 2% would be fine. Commodities and food prices, and housing are rising because the dollar is falling out of bed. Powell didn't want to use the word stagflation. It is true that 2% inflation rips 22% off the dollar in 10 years. Inflation, today, right now, is well over that. Bond yields that trade based on inflation have more than doubled since August. Gasoline prices are up over 70% since November. Lumber prices are up 52% over the same time period. Copper is up 33%. Heck, the entire commodities complex as measured by the Commodity Research Bureau's index is up 26%. It is also true that Chairman Powell's job is to not have inflation but stable prices. It is true that for the past 12 years, we have heard that the Fed was worried about deflation. It is also true that over that period, if one adds up the CPI gains and adds some compounding, that index is up around 20% for the period of deflation fears. It is true that the money supply M2 has grown circa 27% in 12 months due to actions by the Fed. It is also true that the Constitution does not put the power of minting in the hands of the Fed. It is true that Congress can spend and the Treasury borrow very cheaply when the Fed promotes the inflation they are not supposed to promote. This is very attractive to the politicians in power. It is also true that because of this, Congress cares not that the Fed is behaving in this fashion. It is true that most in high positions in this game have inflation-protected government pensions and are insulated from the ill effects of their own policies. It is true that eventually, this is a very dangerous situation. Catastrophic. Powell told Congress, the Fed will do whatever it takes to keep the stock markets propped up in support of the dismal economy. We understand it is creating a massive bubble that will one day pop and destroy the lifetime savings of the average American. We will bankrupt the country and trade its future for more gains today to give cover for Grandpa Joe's economy. What the Fed has been doing is illegal and not part of their charter given by Congress in 1913, but Congress doesn't care because they love the free money provided. The moves can whipsaw in both directions on a daily basis, but the writing is on the wall. We are getting a structural weakening of the US dollar and a significant loss of purchasing power, the consequence of inflation, which is merely an expansion of the money supply. This is where personal allocations in physical gold and silver need to go from the 5% to 10% range to the 20% to 30% range. Besides the metals, you are going to need dollars under the mattress for the 6-month window. You are going to want productive land. An equity portfolio of consumer defensive, utilities, and commodities. And to stay the absolute hell away from longer maturity debt instruments. Do not pick up pennies in front of the steamroller at this stage of the game. If this does spiral out of control, any longs or puts will not be worth much after a bank holiday, or they'll remain frozen. You might be better off using that hard-earned cash for something tangible you can hold in your hand. Pretty much the entire commodity complex is taking off, and that's starting to filter through in various inflation gauges. Once a few more inflation-related data points come in, I think that will be the signal for the 10-year Treasury yield to rise even further, triggering another stock dump. And once stocks have felt enough pain, that will culminate in the Fed expanding its bond buying programs to include longer-dated maturities to smash the yields back down. Has Powell not noticed that the rate on 10 years has tripled in 6 months while the economy has staggered? The almighty Fed is no longer in control of rates, and 15% on 10 years is in our not-so-distant future. Also of note is the price of crude, which is up 64% in 5 weeks. Wait until that invisible tax takes its toll. But on the bright side, I feel much greener now. So what are we doing? Why are we pretending any of this matters? The only thing left to do is get ready for what comes next. Prepare. Invest in survivable commodities. Things needed to live, prices will soon go to the moon. Massive inflation will drive us all to allow the man to bridle and mount us to secure food and other necessities. Understand, the swamp is everybody. The swamp is not ideological beyond what offers the quickest returns. We must recognize that as a society, we abandoned our principles long ago. The battle was lost while we have been living in delusion. The fog is lifting, and we are to see the ruin left behind. Prepare.